welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us on this. Well, here in Halifax, it's a little bit overcast. I don't know what it's like where everyone else is, but thanks for joining us on your Friday night to talk about the 2020 Tidal Bays, 3 of them. We've got Planters Ridge, we have Sainte, Famille, and Lightfoot and Wolfville here with us. We have Josh Horton from Lightfoot, Jesse Cooper from Planters Ridge, and we have Tony Barkhouse from Sainte Famille. So they're going to talk a little bit more about their individual Tidal Bays this year, and we're going to try to focus the conversation a little bit around terroir specifically. So when we say terroir, we're really talking about the unique elements around climate, maybe soil, topography, and then even a little bit about, you know, what humans do when we're growing things in our terroir. So things like farming methods and stuff like that. I think it might be cool if we talk a little bit about that too. So that's really to kick it off. So again, it's to chat about Tidal Bay. And I think hopefully most people joining today know a little bit about Tidal Bay and at least have tried one before and have seen one. It is, for anyone who's not clear, an Appellation wine and Nova Scotia's first Appellation wine. And people on the call can correct me if I'm wrong. I tried to fact check this before I got on, but I think it was first released in 2012. Is that right? Our first Tidal Bay. It seems late, but maybe it was 2012. So I'm not hearing anything against that. So we'll go with 2012, and it's been very, very successful. And it's been a really great way to get Nova Scotian wines on the tables of Nova Scotians. Because I don't know, you know, I think there's a large kind of variation of ages here. But certainly when I moved back to Nova Scotia in 2010, there weren't a lot of people really drinking Nova Scotian wine. People sort of knew we were making it. Some of the young people were a little curious, but there was a little bit of resistance maybe in the older population about what was really happening with Nova Scotia wine. Was it good? That kind of thing. But Tidal Bay came along, and I think what it really presented to people was a really nice signature expression of what Nova Scotia could do really well in terms of a crisp aromatic white. And it was really approachable and it was really delicious. So there was nothing, you know, hard to get your head around about it. It was really good. And I think the light bulb went off for a lot of people at that time thinking, okay, well, maybe Nova Scotia wine is good. Maybe we can start drinking it. So I think that's really wonderful. I should also mention my name. I don't think I've done that yet. My name is Heather Rankin. I'm co-owner and sommelier here at Obladi. I also, I'm an educator as well, a national wine judge, lots of other things. I'm a mom, and a Nova Scotian wine enthusiast. So really, really happy to be here today. And people at home, please use the side chat and say hello, ask questions as they come up. If I feel that it's a good time to sort of input your question and ask the question, I will. Otherwise, we'll just wait toward the end and I'll try to get them all in there, if that sounds good. Hey, Craig. All right. Any questions before we start? I hope folks have some Tidal Bay at home and are sipping away as they're watching us. I wish I could see people. It's so weird speaking into a screen. I can't see anyone. Anyway, so I have actually poured myself a glass of the 2020 Tidal Bay from Planters Ridge. So I've got it here, the bottle here. You see it there. And poured myself a little bit in the glass. Pretty classic Tidal Bay appearance, really reflective, really sort of a pale hue, and really excited. I think we're going to get into it a little bit today, but excited about the 2020 vintage and how great it was for a lot of growers and a lot of winemakers. And hopefully the winemakers on today will go into a little bit about what makes 2020 such a fantastic vintage. I also am on the tasting panel for Tidal Bay as well. So I can clearly remember the distinct differences between the 2019 Tidal Bays, which is a cooler year, and then comparing those with the 2020s. So I think for all those Tidal Bay lovers out there, this is a really good exercise in thinking about vintage. And when people say to me, oh, I love Lightfoot Tidal Bay, we might, stop and ask them, well, which year did you like? Because 2019 was kind of a cool one. So Tidal Bay from Lightfoot might be a little bit green and lean, but 2020 was much more, I guess, lots more heat units in 2020. So the wines from 2020 from Lightfoot, their Tidal Bays, might be a bit more tropical. The flavors might be richer. The wine might have more volume. So I think it's really interesting how our wines here in Nova Scotia are so, I guess, vintage variant that way. And wine is such a living, dynamic thing. So I think that's enough out of me. Just wanted to put that out there. And Craig, he would know. Craig Pinney's on the line, and he just mentioned to me that the first Tidal Bays were launched in 2010. And Craig would know because he had a great book out, and he probably got that fact from his book. So let's go with 2010. Okay, so since I did open the Planters Ridge, should we hand it over to Jesse to talk a little bit about this?
Sounds like a plan to me, Heather. Thank you for the introduction. And hello, everyone that's visiting. And I hope you have wine, and I hope you have glasses, or just wine in a bottle. That's fine too, as long as it's open. Definitely related to the vintage from 2020. And I think a lot of the people who are going to talk this evening would agree. It was a nice warm year. The grapes had a great opportunity to get very ripe, and so we have like a richer textured Tidal Bay. I know that some of the other videos have mentioned this too, which is great. And the Planters Ridge Tidal Bay, it's a pretty strong wine. It has a lot of things going on. It's not busy, but it's definitely got layers. So really, really rewarding to make in the cellar and to grow it in the vineyard. My main thing is to grow the grapes. And then I help in the cellar. I'm a trained winemaker also, but again, the main thing is just work as a team, and we had really good results with the 2020. 19, again, like Heather had alluded to, was a little bit lean, and that was maybe more in the style, like if one of the guests who was watching this evening started to have the Tidal Bays very early on in their existence, and in some of the years were a little bit cooler, and some of the wineries are trying to really find like how that style could be. And so it's fun because we've got two very strong, lots of personality in the 19 and the 20, but on like the spectrum, they really don't sit beside each other. They're farther apart, which is fun, to taste. And though it is still a Tidal Bay, and it maybe tastes like a Tidal Bay from one of the wineries, Planters Ridge or Luckett or whoever it might be, it has a different kind of twist to it. So again, I didn't introduce myself, but my name's Jesse Cooper, and I've worked at Planters Ridge since 2017. And prior to that, I've worked in the wine industry since the early 2000s. And I got into wine working in southern France. I was very fortunate to have an opportunity there that, opened my eyes, opened my taste buds. Wine's fun. And when I came back to Canada, I said, you know what, I'm going to keep doing wine stuff. So I spent some time in BC, and then I'm an East Coaster. I'm from Newfoundland. So I was happy to come back to Nova Scotia. And Tidal Bay is something that is super unique, even like it's unique in the world, and it's super unique in Canada because it is an Appellation wine. And it's something that is a slightly different every year, but it's the same every year. And it works out really, really well for Nova Scotia. And it really works on the strong points that we have as a growing area. And there's other great wines from Nova Scotia too, but Tidal Bay is a great option for many wineries. So maybe I'll try our Planters Ridge. Normally, our wine, the Tidal Bay, is always primarily Lacadie, Frontenac Gris, Frontenac Blanc, Seyval, and a small amount of New York Muscat. But in 2020, because of the growing season, we didn't have as many grapes as we wanted from some of the vineyards and some of the growers. We utilized some Chardonnay, but it worked really well. It was the first time we had done it, but it just added a little bit like a deeper, like fuller piece to that blend. And so yeah, we're gonna try that right now. So here we go, a matching bottle to Heather's. Yeah, and we'll throw it in a glass and see what happens.
We did have a question in the comments, if you feel like addressing it while you're
Sure.
chatting there, Jesse, about the terroir in Port Williams, because I think a lot of people are familiar with, sort of, I don't know if you'd call it the Annapolis Valley proper, but there are maybe more areas in the Annapolis Valley that people are more familiar with. Sure. In terms of their location, proximity to the water, that kind of thing. And maybe you can talk a little bit about what makes Port Williams or your area there a bit unique in terms of terroir.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, that's a good question. So we have the estate property, which is where the winery is located. If you want to spend some time on a nice patio, come on down. It's really great. And literally from that patio, you can see a dike. You can see where the water in the Minas Basin comes right up to the edge. It's maybe 2 kilometers away. But when the tide's really high and the moon's really strong, you can literally see the line of water. So we're right there. It's not as close to some of the other properties, but we can feel the air change in the day with the tides and things like that. And on that property, on that site, we grow New York Muscat, Lacadie, and Frontenac. So those are ones that we use, of course, for the Tidal Bay. But we also have another site, which is an estate site, but it's a satellite site, and it's over in Centreville. So we draw from both sites for the Tidal Bay primarily, and both sites are quite different. But the terroir, if you will, on the ridges in the valley in general, and I think other people would agree with this, the valley is like this big U, but then in the middle of the U, there's like ridges, like little like spines, and there's 2 or 3 of them. It depends on where you are in the valley. You have these spines, and they rise up out of the flats. When you're driving, it's really windy, you're like, oh, this is a crazy part of the valley. Well, that's a flat. That's the dike lands. But then you come up to these little hills. And so the winery is located right on top of one of those little like spine hills. And the soil there has quite a lot of sand in it, but it also has a lot of nutrients. It has a lot of like glacial material and just historic soil, broken down rock. So it's a very, I would call, forgiving site. And the roots are able to get really, really deep. They can find water on them. We don't irrigate anything. And we get really healthy yields from that site year in and year out. And there is a little bit of mineral character to it. Compared to our other site in Centreville, it's quite different. And I would say that the terroir is louder from the Centreville site with certain wines and certain like base grapes. But when you put the two together, it's a pretty strong interaction. And even at times when we've done trials in blended wine, we've tasted things that are kind of even fighting each other. We're like, oh, this wine is too strong for that wine's character, or one wants to be the boss. They're not equal. But there is terroir on those little spines. Where Kennard is, which is a community, an area, there's a spine there. Port Williams is one of these little humps, and even like Canning has a bit of a hump in that area. So yeah, it's definitely different than over where Lightfoot is. It's different than out in the Falmouth area, out around Windsor. So yeah, it's a particular little part of the valley, and it's different than like the edges of the U for sure, right? Which is kind of North and South Mountain. But yeah, I hope that answers it. Yeah.
Yeah, just I think throughout our wine regions in Nova Scotia, there obviously the outer microclimates, like what is kind of traditionally generally going on, and then we have these little pockets of what's going on at this micro level at these individual sites that may have more sun exposure or might be slightly more protected by a mountain, and even in between the vines themselves. I think you folks can speak to it a lot better than I could, but I think people don't quite understand too that foot to foot within these areas you can get quite a bit of variation in temperature and and terroir, soil types, water retention in the soils, all that stuff. I think it's really cool. And when you look at something like the blend in your Tidal Bay, Jesse, there is a lot going on in there. But I think it's important for people to understand maybe what you're doing with those grapes in the Tidal Bay. And I guess as a winemaker and a wine grower, you are seeking balance. Those grapes, you're just.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, putting together a Tidal Bay, like it's a great wine for us to make in Nova Scotia, like I mentioned, but it takes a little bit of thought in the cellar. You don't just like throw it all together like in the kitchen and make something that you're going to eat that's not very good, but you'll eat it anyway. You spend a little bit of time, and you blend stuff, you trial stuff. And, I'm looking at some of the historical numbers here that we have from the winery for our blends, and often they all kind of fall within a certain like range normally of what our house style for Tidal Bay is for Planters Ridge. And that comes out in the wines every year, even if they like slightly change the percentage or, add a little bit of something. But it's a reflection on the personality of the winery, which is really, really cool. And I love that about Tidal Bay, right?
Yeah, there is definitely a signature style to Planters Ridge every year. I think you guys are one of the few that use the Frontenac grapes in your blends, possibly. But I think those add a little something unique and special. And just before we leave you and go on to some of the other wineries here, maybe we can talk through this Tidal Bay a little bit. I just had a sip, and it's really delicious, very refreshing, fruity, but not overly, blousy or, like you were saying, noisy. It's really very coherent, well put together. And then some structure there, even maybe I'm reaching, but a little bit of structure there from the Chardonnay, which gives it a little bit more muscle than we might be used to seeing in Tidal Bay, which is very wispy usually.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, sometimes like Tidal Bays they look almost like water, but they're adult water, but they're pretty water-like looking, but don't be fooled. But this Tidal Bay, again, it definitely has a little bit of more weight to it. It reminds me a little bit like 2017 because it was a bit warmer year. 2016 also, things just got riper. And so, like people have mentioned, more alcohol, richer, better texture on your tongue, more filling, eating like a really ripe strawberry or an underripe strawberry, two different experiences. Right. But I mean, this Tidal Bay, when I crack it open, give it a little swirly swirl in the words of our good friend, Mr. Vaynerchuk. Yeah, there's lots of subtle smells there. There's a floral note. I find with New York Muscat, even a small amount, I tend to get like a sage nose, like almost like a minty, but not mint, which is fun, but not too strong. I mean, I know some people really love New York Muscat. I totally get that.
So the wine scribbler was just asking if you wouldn't mind, Jesse, repeating the grapes in the blend. It's a long wine scribbler, so if you want to have a pen handy.
Yeah, so we've got primarily Lacadie Blanc, and then it's followed by Frontenac Gris, Chardonnay, Frontenac Blanc, Saval, and New York Muscat. And again, the Chardonnay is a new add for us. Hard to say if we hold that in the blend next year. It's really it's up to Mother Nature, and then also just like the taste and the enjoyment people, the feedback we get from people who are supporting us and enjoying the wines. But yeah, no, it's an very enjoyable wine. It's got on the palate, it's got some like beautiful like apple notes. It's got a little bit of like a melon, all in like just pleasant amounts of have some more. That's kind of what's happening here. So
yeah, and people talk about how nice the Tidal Bay is with our local seafood, and I get that. And I also feel like just the florality of these wines. I'm always thinking like soft cheeses and cheeses that we make even here in Nova Scotia, like the Chev from Rancher Acres, or the soft surface ripened Pizzlewig from the Dutchman. Those kind of light and fluffy soft white cheeses, I think would be really nice with something like this. And if you're a salad person, I love Tidal Bay and salads. It's very hard to get wine and salad going. But I think something like this would be really lovely with salad. And of course, our seafood.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much, Jesse. I think there's going to be more opportunities to chat and a little bit more back and forth between you three, but maybe we'll hop over to maybe you, Josh, to talk about the Lightfoot Tidal Bay. I actually don't have the Lightfoot in front of me today, so I'm just going to really focus and live through you on this one.
All right, you're gonna have to trust me. All right, I'm Josh Horton. I'm the winemaker at Lightfoot and Wolfville. I'm also the vineyard manager as well. So I have a really great opportunity to be able to grow the grapes and follow them through to bottle. So that's really quite special. So yeah, the 2020 vintage, it was absolutely amazing. And what made it so great for us was, we had a good growing season, pretty long, not a lot of rain. We didn't have any frost like we did in 18. Definitely it was a longer growing season than 19. Not a lot of rainfall during harvest. And disease pressure was down. The crop was light. It allowed us to ripen the fruit to levels that aren't normally seen in Nova Scotia. So I'd like to think that, the 2020 brought out the full potential in a lot of the varieties that we grow at Lightfoot. So it was a pretty special year. I think it was probably even a little extra special coming off 18 and 19, which were very challenging growing seasons and challenging for the winemaking team for sure. So I've been with Lightfoot since the start. So actually I was just doing the math, and this will be my 7th Tidal Bay, which is kind of hard to believe. It seems like it's such a new thing, Tidal Bay, but 2010, I guess is what Craig is saying. So I believe you. So very good. What can I say? So I have my 2020 Tidal Bay Vintage here. It's made up of 3 different varieties for the 2020, Lacadie, Geisenheim, and Chardonnay. They're varieties that we feel really show off the terroir for sure. So they make great varieties for Tidal Bay. So
For a second there, Josh.
Yeah.
If you could talk a little bit about maybe what each of those grapes are kind of bringing to the blend. If they were friends at a party and you're all bringing a friend for different reasons, and they each have their little thing that they bring to the occasion.
Yeah, they do. They all bring a little something to the game for sure. So when I think about Lacadie, I think of it as kind of like the backbone of Tidal Bay. Like, I don't know if Tidal Bay can be Tidal Bay without Lacadie, for us anyway. It's a variety that's, grown a lot here in Nova Scotia, and for good reason. It produces really interesting wines, and it's a variety that does really well in our climate. So I would say that's a good starting point. A good Lacadie is definitely a really good starting point for making a Tidal Bay. Our Lacadie grows on a relatively rocky soil that we use for our Tidal Bay. So it crops a little lower, the clusters are a little more sparse than what we see in some other sites around the valley. But it makes very interesting Lacadie that has a lot of minerality and a lot of, that apple note. So that's where we start with really good Lacadie. Then moving into the Geisenheim. The Geisenheim is kind of a variety that has some really interesting aromatics that are really clean, and they're not distorted. They're focused aromatics on the Geisenheim, so that's a lot of times where we're going to reach a little bit to try to bring in some of this nice aromatic to the Tidal Bay. And then Chardonnay. Chardonnay is a variety that we grow a lot at Lightfoot and Wolfville. It's a variety that tends to do pretty well here in Nova Scotia. It definitely shows off the terroir very well. And it also adds quite a bit of body to the Tidal Bay. It can have a little bit more mid palate than some of the other varieties. So it definitely adds some weight to the blend. So yeah, that's the breakdown. I'd say they all bring their own things, and together they're better together than they are on their own. So, yep.
Maybe the New York Muscat that Jesse was talking about in his Tidal Bay is maybe doing the same thing as your Geisenheim in a way, in terms of aromatics and that kind of plurality.
Yeah, we definitely look for aromatics. Everything is fermented stainless steel, so we're trying to pull out as much aromatics we can from Lacadie and Chardonnay as well. I like to have, in my Tidal Bay, I like it to have that signature Nova Scotia aromatic, very clean and undistorted, but I don't want it overpowering at all. I like the wine, the Lightfoot and Wolfville Tidal Bay to be a little more serious. So that's what I like. Yeah. What else can I say? Yeah, so I don't know if anybody has it in their glass, but I have some here. So 2020 Tidal Bay. It's very fresh and clean for 2020. It's definitely got that signature Nova Scotia aromatic. On the palate, definitely with the 2020 vintage, like we say it a lot, like you start to see going from like a greener kind of apple and a less ripe vintage to like more tropical fruit that we can see in a riper vintage. I don't know if we're quite tropical, but you definitely start to see some of those less green apple and maybe some more ripe apple happening. As far as citrus go, less lemon and maybe a little bit riper citrus that we'd see in the 2020 vintage. So yeah, definitely it's got a strong minerality note, which I feel is like our Lacadie that brings that to the table. And yeah, I think that the flavors and the balance of our 2020 really match the growing season. So I'm happy with this wine. It could be my favorite vintage so far.
Ooh. And your Tidal Bay is certified organic this year.
Yeah, I should mention that it's certified organic, and it's kind of a partnership with a couple of our growers that are also certified. So the fruit comes mainly from the estate at Lightfoot, but it also some fruit comes from Raven Hill. And we also have another grower with a small plot of organic fruit, Andrew Neat. So a little shout out to him. And together we're able to source enough organic fruit to make an organic Tidal Bay. So we're pretty proud of that one.
And the Neats there in Elsford, right?
Yes, they're in Elsford. Yes. Yep.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So are they, and while we're talking about terroir, we did talk about vintage, which is a big part of terroir, the conditions of that particular year. We talked a little bit about farming method, which I think is, feeds into terroir. It is something that we're, doing that has an impact on the grapes. Anything about the soils that you wanted to talk to you a little bit about?
Yeah, so we do grow on a few different types of soil, depending on our vineyard sites. And yeah, they all kind of produce different flavors. I think I mentioned with Lacadie, it grows on a very rocky soil, so very low cropping, but you get some really pretty aromatics and some really complex flavors. So yeah, all our sites are different, and I don't know if I can say that I favor one from the other. But I think a combination of having different fruit from different vineyards grown on different soil definitely add to the complexity of our Tidal Bay. So I guess that's what I could say about soils. Yeah.
Yeah, great. I know we have a lot of moisture in Nova Scotia to deal with most of the time, and this was a drier vintage from what I can gather. Was that helpful?
Oh yes, definitely helpful, especially us being organic, but not just the organic guys, the conventional guys. Having a drier season allows us to spray less, allows us to use less pesticides in the vineyard because there's less disease pressure. So I feel like less spray in the vineyard also helps to kind of refine the terroir in our wines, keeping them clean. So yeah, it was good. Good
Great.
vintage. Yeah.
So Josh, I'm sure you're very well versed in tasting and analyzing your own wines, but maybe you wanted to, taste your Tidal Bay just for the group and maybe talk through what you're getting a little bit, and then we can move on to Tony.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm just gonna pour myself a little bit. It is Friday, right? So the first thing when I'm smelling my Tidal Bay is like I can definitely smell the ripeness, the extra heat units we got from 2020, which is great. So I'm getting like a riper apple. I don't want to say tropical fruit, but definitely like definitely ripe, maybe a little bit of melon. It's got like a beautiful little floral note that's very nice, I find.
And do you find the weight at all this year a little
like
this year?
Yeah, very comparable. I think Jesse mentioned close to 17, like definitely comparable to 17. And yeah, coming off 18 and 19, it's we're really happy with this. I think everybody would be very happy in Nova Scotia, all the winemakers and vineyard guys, if we had more vintages like 2020.
Great.
So on the palate, I'm getting like fresh apple, definitely some citrus there, and that really nice minerality. Talking about terroir, I always feel like I can taste Nova Scotia in the wines, especially in the Tidal Bay. I don't know, it's not a saltiness, but it's something that reminds me of the ocean. And it's definitely ocean influence, and I can really taste it in certain wines, and Tidal Bay being one of them. So yeah, you can taste Nova Scotia.
You sure can.
I had that same experience, but with carrots.
Nice.
I took a bag of carrots from Nova Scotia all the way to Ontario, and I was down like the last few carrots, and I didn't really notice. But then I had one on a certain day, and I went, man, this tastes like Nova Scotia. It tastes like saline, minerally, dusty, chalky ocean spray or something.
Yeah.
With a carrot. And I had no idea. It kind of showed up in my taste buds. I was like, oh, that's definitely not a carrot from here. Okay.
It's funny, I've had similar experiences being away, tasting my wine in another province or another country. It definitely takes you home very quickly. So it's pretty cool that way.
It is. And I think the more you taste wines from around the world, you do that distinctiveness that Nova Scotia has in our wines is even more apparent. It is. We do talk about how unique our wines are, and they really are unique. And if they're in a lineup of white wines from around the world, and you taste one, it's unmistakable. So that's pretty cool. So thanks for that, Josh. I did have a quick question from Craig, and we'll move on to Tony. He was wondering about. He was remarking on how dry the Tidal Bay was this year from you guys. Was wondering what the RS, the residual sugar, might be.
Yeah, it's at 12 grams this year. And it was interesting doing some trials with where to leave the residual sugar with Tidal Bay this year, where you have so much more weight. So it definitely allowed us to be able to make a drier wine, but yet still keep a really nice balance. So the vintage allowed us to do that, which is great. So.
And does Tidal Bay still have the 11% alcohol limit? Is that still a thing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like in a year last year, usually you wouldn't have to keep an eye out on the grapes ripening, worrying about getting over 11% alcohol. But last year you had to watch a little closer. Yeah. So makes it interesting.
Cool. All right. Thank you so much, Josh, for that.
No problem.
Keep the questions coming from everybody. Just had a note here from Rebecca saying, I'm glad to hear you say that about the salty and ocean. I guess the social element in the wine. That's what I taste so often as well. And it's so subtle. So yeah, very, very common tasting note. That's a bit of it's also an aromatic too. That kind of salinity or sea brine or whatever you want to call it. So Tony.
Hi everyone.
your Tidal Bay.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the intro, Heather. First of all, I want to apologize. It appears my internet signal is a little unstable, so I may disappear on you, but I'm hoping I won't. My name is Tony. I'm the winemaker at Famille Winery in Falmouth. And a little bit about Famille. It's been around for about 30 years, celebrating our 30th birthday. And I have been there for 20 of those 30 years. And I started off working in the vineyard and now and working in the cellar, and I worked my way up as winemaker there at Famille. And I've been doing that for about 7 years now. So it's all going well. Our Tidal Bay, the 2020 Tidal Bay, I am very happy with it. First of all, our crop in 2020 was quite small compared to what we usually get. We found that the berries were smaller than normal, probably because we didn't get much rain. It was a nice hot season, but what I did find was the flavors in the Lackady and the other varieties that we used in our Tidal Bay were pretty intense on 2020. So I was really happy when they came in. We use a blend of Lackady Blanc, Siegfried, and Riesling. Siegfried is a grape that we've been growing at Famille for a few years now, and it has some really nice fruit flavors, and it has a bit of bite. It's a higher acidic wine, but in 2020, it actually really got really ripe and had these beautiful flavors. So I decided to use it as part of the blend. Our Tidal Bay. So what I find is that, am I still on? Okay. I'm losing some of my signal here apparently, which is unfortunate, but I hope you can all hear me. Anyway, I'd like you to have a try of this thing for me. I'm not so sure who has a glass of that. Okay, my signal's back on. I'm getting little bleeps that my signal is unstable. Yes, this is our 2020 Tidal Bay. Very happy with it. When I swirl the wine around like that, I usually like to stick my nose right in the glass and just have a little smell. And what I smell some ripe apples. I'm getting some fruit from the Riesling.
I think if people still have some of the other Tidal Bays in their glasses, it's a nice time to sort of once we're finished tasting the Sainte Famille, is to go back and look at how different the Tidal Bays are. There's a lot of commonalities that we're talking about the shared terroir, but each Tidal Bay is very unique. And I think the best way to really appreciate that is to have a few in front of you and taste and smell them together. And one thing I noticed, Tony, as we were pouring your Sainte Famille and smelling it, is how different the color is compared to the Planter's Ridge. Planter's Ridge has almost like a soft pink hue, which might be coming from the Muscat in this case, I'm not sure, or maybe the Franc Necri. And then yours is more of a traditional, very pale gold. But just thought I'd remark there. I cut you off when you were going through the aromatics. Sorry about that. Please continue.
Oh, that's quite all right. That's quite all right. Yeah, the aromatics. What I'm smelling is the fresh fruit, and the Riesling is coming through. I was very happy to find that the Siegfried was ripe, so that we were able to use that in our blend. Like I said before, it changes from time to time. We don't always use the same varieties in our Tidal Bay, but always the one constant seems to be Lackady Blanc. That always seems to get in the mix. I've been making Tidal Bay almost since the beginning. The first year that it was that it was out. We missed the mark, so we couldn't get it, but we've had one ever since. So I'm happy to say that. And the terroir of the Falmouth area in our estate vineyard, which is where all of our Lackady and other grape varieties come from, or our Tidal Bay. The soil there is kind of a clay soil. It's a little heavier, holds the moisture. So you have some of the earth in the flavor of the wine. We're basically right on the floodplains of the Annapolis or the Avon River, just on the edge of the Avon River Valley. So we have some of the benefits of being close to the water. It's Sainte Famille site has been recorded as one of the hotter sites for growing grapes in Nova Scotia, and although they say that, we did not escape the frost from a couple of years ago. So we're still susceptible to that, like a lot of everyone else is. But the soil is kind of like a heavy clay soil. It holds moisture well. There's not a lot of rock in there. There's not a lot of sand. There's not a lot of loam. So we have to continually do leaf analysis and soil sample analysis to make sure that we have all the nutrients unlocked in the soil to supply the vines with what they need. What I tried this year in our Tidal Bay was I tried using some different yeasts, and not using just one yeast for all of our varieties, but using several yeasts, and then finding the best parts of each one of those yeasts and blending them together to get something really interesting. Our Tidal Bay is traditionally has nice bite, like an Appalachian wine should, and it isn't too sweet. I'm not a fan of sweet Tidal Bay. I do like some sweeter white wines, but for me, I think a Tidal Bay should be crisp and clean, and floral, if that's a good word. I don't know. Are there any questions out there, or anyone?
I did have a question a little bit about Siegfried and its relationship to, is it Riesling? Siegfried
Yes.
Yeah. Did you find...
Siegfried and Riesling and Lackady.
Right. But Siegfried itself, is that a cross with Riesling? Or is it,
I think it has some vinifera background. It may have some Riesling background, but I'm not 100% sure. I don't know a lot about that grape. It appears that we may be one of the very few sites that actually grow that, but we've had some success with it. So I wanted to continue growing it, and on its own, it has has some kind of like honey flavors, subtle honey flavors, and kind of acidic, almost some honey flavors, and at some points it almost reminds me a little of rhubarb, ripe rhubarb. But yeah, I put Siegfried in our Tidal Bay many times and have had good luck with it. So I think I may continue that in the future.
Yeah, really like this one. This, I find, of the two, because I don't have all three in front of me, I feel that it's maybe the least, obviously fruity Tidal Bay. I feel like there's more of the earthy components you were talking about earlier. There's a florality there, but it's more like a pasture, like a meadow florality. I don't want to say dandelions, that's not the right word, but, and you got a honey note there that might be coming from the Riesling or something, but it's a different Tidal Bay. It's not as sort of like, I guess, opulent as the others, a little bit more serious.
Yeah, that's a good way to explain it. I think some of those flavors are coming from the terroir of the actual vineyard. At Sainte Famille, and I'm sure, like everyone else, we just don't harvest the grapes and make a Tidal Bay. We have to have a plan in place. We do cluster thinning and everything, so that to ensure that we have the best grapes available. You were going to ask a question, Heather?
Well, maybe I was, but then you mentioned cluster thinning. So maybe for the folks on the call at home, maybe you could talk a little bit about what cluster thinning is and why we do that in Nova Scotia sometimes.
Well, for us, cluster thinning, if you have a grapevine, for example, for folks who aren't sure what it is, you can let the grapes grow and start cluster thinning. The actual vines have first clusters, second clusters, third clusters. So what we do is we start taking the smaller clusters off, so the plant can focus on all of its nutrition going into the remaining clusters. And what happens is that those remaining clusters that are left on the vines, they will get bigger, they'll get sweeter, they'll have more fruit, more flavors, and it sounds kind of strange that you're cutting your grapes off and throwing them on the ground, which is exactly what we do, but it's for good reason, because it in the end you have a higher quality juice that, in my opinion, makes a higher quality wine.
Some owners don't like that though, and there's a real struggle some years.
Oh boy, I know.
You can understand it. You just, you need the vine to focus its energy a little bit. It's like life. You have too much on the go, you're only going to give a little bit of attention to everything. But if you kind of pare it down, focus on a few things that really matter, then maybe those few things that you have are going to be better off. And you can maybe think of grapevines and grapes a little bit like that. One thing I was hearing from some winemakers from 2020 is that although it was a really great vintage, the yields were sometimes low in some cases, or they were a bit lower, which isn't always a bad thing, because sometimes consumers hear, oh, low yields, they think, oh, you didn't make enough, like the vines were not healthy maybe and didn't make enough fruit. So maybe one of you could talk a little bit about that, the lower yields in some cases in 2020 and what that meant for the wine.
Sure. Lower yields isn't a bad thing from a winemaker's point of view. Might be a bad thing from an owner financial kind of situation, I guess. What ends up happening is less grapes, more energy to the clusters that are remaining. So you end up with better sugars, lower acids a lot of the time, and more concentrated flavors. So it's a necessity in a growing region like ours, where we're so on the edge. Some of the varieties that we're growing here in the province would just want to produce too much fruit for what they could ripen. So by removing these clusters, it allows the ones that remain to ripen. My best suggestion when we do this, Tony, is don't ever let the owners in the vineyard when you're dropping the fruit, because it's a hard thing to look at. But it is a necessity. We'd rather have one bottle of something really good than two bottles of something that's not as flavorful. So super important. The low yields were probably a result of the frost in 18 as well as the short season in 19. So it was kind of bittersweet. It was nice because the grapes were so flavorful and so concentrated last year, but we wish we would have had double the crop. Because the vintage was so good, we would have loved to have twice as many grapes last year, but that's just how it works. It's a necessity to produce good wine in the province. So
yeah, you're exactly right, Josh.
Yeah,
exactly
sure.
right. We could have used a lot more Tidal Bay ourselves, but the crop was small. The Tidal Bay that we did get is, in my opinion, one of our best. So I'm really happy with it. Like you say, the owners they don't really like to see you cut fruit off and let it drop on the ground.
Yeah, it happens.
But winemaker's secret, maybe.
Yeah, that's right. The other thing that's worth mentioning is having a good vintage like 2020 with a low crop yield really set us up well for this year. This year's the plants, we had a very mild winter, a low crop last year. Our vines in the vineyards for the most part this year are looking really good. We've escaped, I hope, all early frost at this point. So we're looking at having a really good vintage this year with hopefully some good fruit cropping levels. So here's hoping to a good vintage.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it as well.
Excellent. Yeah, I think what some people maybe don't realize too is that, you know, when you talk about the growing season, it doesn't just start, you know, at bud break or flowering or fruit or anything or raisin. It happens at the, you know, in winter as far back. I mean, you need good snowfall, I suppose, and a good water table. That other things have to come together throughout the year to make that, you know, growing period for the vine successful.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's the scenario, and really a lot of activities, a lot of what you'll get for the wine the following year starts the year before, and like Josh alluded to, and like that's for like grape growers and winemakers, like the holy grail is like well-rested grapevines from the previous year, a good growing season for that year, and then the year that you're in, like the following year, you get lots of really ripe grapes. To get those two things, lots of grapes and really ripe at the same time, that only happens very rarely and all over the world. Doesn't matter where you grow grapes and make wine. And the Europeans and the Australians, everyone understands you can't have both every year. So we're like Josh said, we're pretty well set up. And so if we're fortunate, we could have a decent amount of the nicely ripe grapes for all the Nova Scotia wines, Tidal Bay included.
Great, yeah, because I think one of the, we're talking about yields and things. I think one of the requirements for Tidal Bay, at least it was, is there were some cropping limits. I don't know, it was like 4 tons per acre or something like that, 3 or 4.
Yeah,
no, it's at least I think it's 4. Yeah.
Yeah, 4 tons per acre on average. Yeah, so you know, that's 4 tons is a pretty good crop per acre in Nova Scotia.
Yeah.
But in the rest of the, you know, some other parts of the world, that would not be worth planting the vineyard for. So we have to work very hard to get our grapes here for sure.
Yeah.
And yeah, 4 ton an acre is a big target to achieve a lot of years in Nova Scotia. So yeah, usually much lower.
So Josh, you were talking about we may be out of the weeds for early. I never know how to say this properly. Early frost? Is it early frost now or late frost?
Late frost, exactly.
Right. And so a question there about someone saying there might be a frost warning tonight as well.
Yeah, like I'm just gonna pretend I didn't hear that. I try not to pay attention to the frost warnings right now. It's hard. You know, I think in 2018 we seen a frost on June 4th, I think it was, which was the latest frost in like 100 years in Nova Scotia. And it really, if you get a frost like that in the spring, it makes our jobs really, really difficult for the whole year. For 12 months or longer, we're dealing with the results of just one night. So last night was very close in the valley. It was supposed to be like 7 or 8 degrees overnight. A lot of vineyards seen 3 degrees, which is still a long ways away from 0, but there was some patchy frost. Some people reported seeing some things on their windshields. So that's I don't know how to explain how that makes a winemaker or a vineyard guy feel. It's things can change very quickly. Right now, like, we feel very good about our growing season. So let's just hope we don't see anything tonight, and we'll be cruising on through.
This should be the last night.
Yeah, it depends on what stage the vine is at too, right, for these frosts. I mean, some frosts can have, the problem with the 2018 frost was the timing of it and the stage that the vine was in at that stage, the vulnerability of the vine.
The vines this morning, first thing this morning, they didn't look very happy. Like, they've had a lot of new growth over the last couple days, like mid-30s. So the growth is just going insane out there. And then all of a sudden they're faced with, 3 degrees Celsius. They were all very droopy this morning, and they weren't looking happy. But by lunchtime, things warmed up and back on track. So it was close.
It's going off to school this morning.
Sorry.
A lot of kids going off to school this morning, same way, very limp. I don't want to go, but by lunchtime they're fine.
They're all right, yeah.
They're good.
Yep.
That's great. Well, I think this is so much great information, and I think we're getting a lot of tidbits as we talk about the 2020 Tidal Bays, just what it's like to grow grapes, make wine in Nova Scotia. And I think what is becoming obvious, to people on the call, if they didn't already know, was that we are operating in a fairly extreme environment for grape growing. It is considered a cool climate region. But as we're seeing now, I think more so in the last, say, 5-6 years now, is that it's becoming also very unpredictable. And what is a normal vintage is becoming less of a common thing. And what is becoming more common is more unpredictability and more erratic weather. And I wondered if anybody wanted to talk a little bit about that and how they're feeling about that, because to me it would seem that someone like you, Tony, that's had quite a bit of experience growing grapes and making wine in Nova Scotia, you get to a period where you're very equipped and skilled in what you do, and then along comes weather that is just not doing what it used to do. It's almost requiring a whole new toolkit from our industry, a whole new set of skills that we'll need in order to continue making wine in Nova Scotia.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Conditions aren't always favorable, and although we all strive for those really, really ripe grapes, with the acids down there, realistically, that's it's always a bit of a struggle in Nova Scotia. I like to say we're living right on the edge of the grape growing region. So I mean, we're always trying new different ideas and new ways to bring that fruit out of the vines. I know I've done lots of experiments on cool fermentations to keep the fermentation nice and slow and cool, so it just bubbles away. I like to say that it just it's kind of like boiling vegetables in a roundabout way. You can boil the heck out of them, and you lose some of the flavors. And the same goes true for a fermentation. If you just let it go and it starts to get warm, maybe at 20 degrees or so, and then you start losing some of those fruit flavors. So I always like to keep the fermentations regulated, and we use some cooling on our tanks to keep those fermentations down to maybe 15 or 16 degrees, and let them just take their time. In the end, it gives us more fruit. Yeah. So I'd say, winemakers in Nova Scotia definitely need a big toolbox to be able to coax all of those flavors out of the grapes that we get from the area. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I heard Jesse earlier talking about, the making wine and growing grapes is a very tough, unpredictable job anywhere in the world. France is very difficult as well. And there are places, that like, say maybe Chile or Argentina, where, the growing environment is much more consistent and predictable. You can count on more or less a good number of days of sunshine, cloudless skies, when the rains are coming, for how long. Growing grapes and making wine in those types of conditions are very different to growing grapes and making wine here. And I think maybe sometimes Nova Scotians forget that, and what a feat it is to actually make wine in a region where any colder, and I probably wouldn't even be able to grow grapes.
One degree colder, and it would make a big difference for us. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're dealing with potential hurricanes there. We're dealing with early frosts. It's really difficult to come out with award-winning wines some seasons. We really have to put our nose to the grindstone, I guess you could say, and to make the most out of what we get.
Yeah, it's I always find it really amazing how many different curveballs Mother Nature can throw at us. a lot of people think about frost, but she always seems to brew up something special for us. Windstorms have been issues over the years.
Yeah.
Like this time of the year, the shoots are very tender on the plants. We've seen high winds come in and knock shoots off, do a lot of damage. Hurricanes, hail, we've had a little hail this spring. The rain is definitely something that is always plaguing us, causing disease issues in the vineyard. But yeah, I guess I shouldn't talk too loud or she'll figure something else to throw at us. But it's just when you think you got it figured out, something else happens. So you got to be flexible.
To be honest, I think anyone on this call, like the people who are winemakers here in Nova Scotia who successfully make enjoyable wines that people are enjoying and liking, you need to really give them a pat on the back, because with the skills that you're forced to learn here compared to other parts of the world, you can go to a lot of other areas all over the world and make wine way easier and have different results, of course, with different grapes, different weather. But if you can make really tasty wine here, like what we're doing with Tidal Bays, we're good. We're good, and everyone should really pat themselves on the back for the support and just being able to deal with the craziness. I have friends in other regions, and they would like, I'm not going there. Hurricane, not going there. Death frost, not going there. I have friends in France, they ask me, how do you deal with the frost? I say, you don't deal with it. You just go on to the next stage and make another plan. But I think that's something that I really love about Nova Scotia and the industry, is that like what we deal with, like some people, they'd fall over and like pack it up and leave. And that's really, really cool. And that's marginal, but awesome marginal. So.
Yes, well, smooth seas do not make skilled sailors, or something like that. Skilled sailors here. And if these Tidal Bays are any indication, we've got some amazing winemakers in Nova Scotia. These 3 Tidal Bays are really delightful. Hope you guys are really proud of these wines. Delicious. And I'm not sure what more else we can stay on the call. I could for hours more and talk more, but I'm sure people on the other end have been sort of put aside some time and are thinking about wrapping up. So I think we covered most of the terroir, most of what we needed to speak about in terroir for Nova Scotia. Josh even talked about like wind slightly and how it can be a bad thing, especially when a vine is young and it's getting rocked a little bit there. But wind can also be a really great thing too, aeration of the vines and pests and all that stuff, especially with disease pressure that we have here. So that's great, but 2020 was a real gift, and I think it's really showing in these Tidal Bays here today. We did have a question here from Rachel Allen. Rachel, we were talking about this just before we went on the call about the 2020 Lightfoot Tidal Bays. They're not in the NSLCs yet, but I think a shipment, I understand, did go. They're not in the stores yet.
Yeah, should be there very soon. I'll definitely look into, but yeah, they have some of our Tidal Bay, and hopefully it will be hitting the shelves very soon.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I went to a few today. I couldn't find it. A quick question from Christine Bell asking, I think, how far along the Le Havre River vineyards are. Anybody here know anything about what's going on down there? I don't know.
No, unfortunately not, no.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think that's a good amount of information. I just had a request. I don't know if this is okay, but we had a request from somebody saying we should all turn on our cameras and do a big cheers.
I like it.
Hi, I think that's a nice way.
Hey, what's
I
up,
like
everybody?
that.
Woo!
Hey, everybody ready? Okay. 1, 2, 3. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers to a good season.
An even better one in 2021.
Great.
Agreed.
Well, thanks, guys, so much. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Jesse. Thank you, Tony. and everybody at home. This was really informative for me, and I hope everybody at home too. If you do have questions, I'm sure you could feed them through to Wines of Nova Scotia, and we can get the answers out there. But this was really fun.
Thank you very much, Heather.
Okay.
Thank you, Heather.
Great to see you,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone.
See you later.
Bye, Tidal Bay. Bye, Tidal Bay.
Absolutely.
Enjoy.